Her violent ex-husband choked her in public. The Korean Mafia boss slowly removed his rings. "Mommy, can we get the strawberry yogurt? Please. Only if you finish your homework. Kiki." I never thought a Tuesday evening at the grocery store would be the night I almost died in front of my daughter. Kiki had been full of energy all day. The kind of bright, buzzing 7-year-old energy that makes even a tired mother smile. Her old school shoes had finally given out, and I'd been promising her a treat all week. The grocery run was supposed to be quick. Just milk, bread, noodles, and maybe the strawberry yogurt she'd been eyeing for 2 weeks. She skipped beside me down the aisle, humming something from school, her little hand swinging free and easy. She still believed errands could be adventures. I wanted to let her keep believing that. That's when I saw Rashid. He wasn't supposed to be anywhere near us. The restraining order was explicit. The court had been clear. The police had been clear. But there he was, moving through the cereal aisle like the law meant nothing, like it never had, with that look on his face. That familiar, stomach-dropping look that meant he hadn't come to talk. Kiki felt it before she saw him. Her humming stopped. I tried to turn us around. I grabbed the basket, pulled her close, and started moving toward the exit. But Rashid was already closing in, weaving past a woman pushing a cart. His eyes locked on me the whole time. Shoppers browsed. A child cried somewhere near the checkout. Life moved normally around us. Nobody ever knows. Not until it's too late. "Damalola." His voice cut through the noise like a slap. "Don't you walk away from me." I kept moving. Kiki's hand found mine. He caught us between the cereal and the cleaning supplies. His hand hit my shoulder first, spinning me around so hard the basket swung from my hip. I could see it in his eyes, the rage, the entitlement, the satisfaction that he'd found us. "Rashid, please," I whispered. "Not here. Not in front of Kiki." "You embarrassed me," he hissed. "You took my daughter from me." I started to speak. I never got the chance. His hand closed around my throat. The basket hit the floor. Milk burst open across the tiles. The world tilted. I clawed at his wrist, gasping, my ears ringing, my vision starting to darken at the edges. People were staring. Someone gasped. No one moved. They never move. Then I heard Kiki. "Daddy, stop." She dropped to her knees right there on the dirty grocery store floor. Her little hands pressed together like she was praying, tears already streaming down her face. "Please don't hurt my mommy. Please, Daddy. Please." Rashid didn't look at her. He was smiling. If you're watching this right now, wherever you are in the world, hit that like button and drop your country in the comments. Because what happened next didn't just save my life. Changed everything. And I need you to see what it looks like when the right person decides that enough is enough. That's when I noticed the man at the end of the aisle. He had been standing near the wine shelf, still and quiet, wearing a black coat that looked far too expensive for a Tuesday grocery run. His hair was neatly styled. His posture was composed, almost unnervingly calm, like he was observing something mildly interesting rather than a woman being choked in public. But his eyes were different, cold, calculating. Slowly, deliberately, he lifted his hands and began removing his rings. 1, 2, 3. He slipped each one into his coat pocket. Kiki told me later, that was the exact moment she stopped being terrified. Because she said something in her 7-year-old heart told her. Somebody is about to help. He moved forward. I didn't know his name yet. I didn't know anything about him except that his voice, when he finally spoke, carried a kind of quiet authority that made the entire aisle go still. "Let her go." 2 words. That's all it took. And that was the beginning of everything. Rashid called at 11:47 p.m. I watched his name light up the screen from jail and let it ring until it didn't. Then I put the phone face down on the nightstand, pulled Kiki closer, and stared at the ceiling. She hadn't left my side since we got home. Hadn't asked for cartoons, hadn't asked for dinner, hadn't asked for the strawberry yogurt still sitting in a grocery bag by the door. She just curled against me in my bed with her small fingers wrapped around my wrist like she was checking, again and again, that I was still there. Her breathing evened out around midnight. Mine didn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt it again. The pressure. The tightening. The way the world had started going gray at the edges while Kiki's voice cut through it like something breaking. I'd press my fingers lightly against my own throat just to feel that I could breathe, that the air was still coming, and then I'd pull my hand away, ashamed of doing it again. Around 2 a.m., Kiki woke up crying. Not screaming, just crying quietly, the way children do when the nightmare is too real to shake off but too exhausting to fully explain. "I don't want to go back to sleep," she whispered. "You don't have to," I told her. We sat up together with the lamp on until her eyes got heavy again. I watched her face go soft and still, and I thought, not for the first time, that she was braver than me. She had dropped to her knees for me. She had begged, out loud in front of strangers, without a single thought for her own pride. 7 years old. It was while tucking the blanket around her that I felt it. Stiff and small in the pocket of my jacket draped over the chair. The card. I turned it over in my fingers. No company name. No title. No address. Just a name, Jae-sung, and a phone number printed in clean, unassuming type. The cardstock itself was thick. Expensive. The kind that doesn't bend easily. I set it on the nightstand and looked at it for a long time. "Who are you?" The two men in dark suits who had appeared behind him. The way the entire section of the store had shifted the moment they flanked him. The calm in his face that wasn't the calm of someone who didn't understand danger. It was the calm of someone who had long stopped being afraid of it. I put the card back in my pocket and told myself I wouldn't need it. 2 days later, I found the note. It had been slipped under my apartment door sometime in the night. Folded once, no envelope. You can't hide forever. My hands were shaking before I finished reading it. I read it twice anyway. The way you do when you're hoping the words will rearrange themselves into something less terrifying. They didn't. Rashid was in jail, which meant someone had done this for him. I locked the deadbolt, then the chain. Then I stood in my hallway with my back against the door and tried to remember how to breathe properly while Kiki watched cartoons in the next room. Completely unaware. I pulled the card from my pocket. He answered on the second ring. "Stay inside," Jae-sung said, before I'd finished explaining. "Do not open your door for anyone. There's a note. Someone was here and Rashid is." "I know," he said. "Stay inside." The line went quiet, but he didn't hang up. An hour passed. Then another. Kiki fell asleep on the couch. I sat by the door and waited, though I couldn't have said what I was waiting for. Eventually, I looked through the peephole. The hallway was empty. I unlocked the chain carefully and opened the door 1 inch. The note was gone. Not crumpled. Not moved. Gone as though it had never been there at all. And further down the hall, near the stairwell door, something else was gone too. A man I had never seen before, who I only realized in that moment I had noticed. Leaning against the wall when I'd last checked, had also quietly disappeared. I closed my door, locked it again, and stood in the silence of my apartment with a feeling I couldn't quite name. Something that sat uneasily between relief and the slow, creeping understanding that the man whose card I was still holding in my hand had a very long reach. The question was whether that was something to feel safe about, or something to be afraid of. I wasn't sure yet, but I kept the card. I noticed the woman on Wednesday. She was standing near the school gate when I arrived to pick Kiki up. Dark coat, hands clasped in front of her, posture too still for a parent. She didn't look at me directly. She didn't need to. When Kiki came running out and took my hand, the woman fell into step about 20 feet behind us and stayed there the entire 4 blocks home. I didn't ask Jae-sung about her. I wasn't sure I wanted the answer confirmed out loud. By Thursday, I'd noticed the cars too. Different ones each day, never the same plate twice. Parked at intervals around my building in a pattern that felt less like coincidence and more like a perimeter. Rashid's friends had been calling every other day since the arrest, leaving voicemails that were careful enough to say nothing specific and threatening enough that I'd stopped sleeping through the night. Then, quietly, the calls stopped. All of them. At once. I didn't ask about that either. Jae-sung came on Friday evening. He stood in the doorway of my apartment looking slightly out of place, like a man accustomed to large, quiet rooms who had just stepped into a space full of crayon drawings taped to the walls and a half-eaten bowl of cereal on the coffee table. He was still dressed well, still composed. But something about the smallness of my kitchen seemed to catch him off guard in a way that Rashid never had. Kiki decided he was interesting immediately. She appeared from her bedroom within 2 minutes, assessed him with the frank, unhurried stare that only small children can get away with, and then held up a drawing of what appeared to be a lion wearing a crown. "Do you like art?" she asked. He looked at the drawing seriously. "Ido. I made this one today. The lion is a queen because girl lions work harder." Something moved briefly across his face. Not quite a smile, but close. "She's right," he said. That was enough for Kiki. She dragged him to the kitchen table and spread her drawings out like a merchant displaying wares. He looked at each one. He didn't rush her. I stood in the doorway and watched, and felt something I couldn't immediately identify. Later, when Kiki had moved to the floor with her crayons and stopped paying attention to us, Jae-sung said quietly, almost to himself, "She likes drawing." "She always has," I said. A pause. "I had a daughter who liked drawing." He said it the way people say things they didn't fully intend to, the words out before the guard came back up. He didn't look at me when he said it. Kiki glanced up. "Where is she?" The question landed softly, the way only a child's can. "She passed away," he said. Kiki considered this with the quiet gravity she reserved for serious things. Then she went back to her drawing, and somehow that was exactly the right response. After Kiki went to bed, I asked him, "Why are you helping us?" He was quiet for a long moment, his hands resting on the table, looking at nothing in particular. "My wife and daughter were killed by a drunk driver," he said finally. 3 years ago. I was 20 minutes away when it happened." A pause. 20 minutes. I didn't speak. When I saw Kiki on the floor of that store, her hands together like that, begging, he stopped, exhaled slowly. I had been too late once. I wasn't going to be too late again. The apartment was very quiet. I reached across the table without thinking and rested my hand over his. He didn't pull away, and I understood then that he wasn't just protecting Kiki. He was trying, in the only way he knew how, to protect the daughter he couldn't save. Came on a Thursday morning. I had just dropped Kiki at the school gate, watched her disappear through the doors, and was walking back to the bus stop with my coffee still warm in my hand. Normal. Quiet. The kind of morning that had started to feel almost safe again. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. No text, just an image. Kiki, walking through the school entrance. Her purple backpack. Her plates. The exact coat she was wearing right now at this very moment inside that building. The timestamp read 8:43 a.m. For minutes ago, I stopped walking. A man behind me stepped around me without looking up. The street kept moving. I stood completely still in the middle of it, staring at my daughter's back on a 4-inch screen, and felt the ground shift under me in a way that had nothing to do with the pavement. Then the message loaded beneath it. "You trust the wrong man." Jae-sung answered before the second ring finished. I couldn't get the words out in the right order. I know I said Kiki's name. I know I said school and photo and they're watching, and my voice was doing something I didn't recognize, too high, too fast, too close to breaking. "Listen to me," he said. Calm. Immediate. "Go back to the school. Stay inside the front office. Do not leave the building. I'm sending someone now." Jae-sung. They took a photo of her. "I know. Go inside." I was already running. Kiki was pulled from class within the hour. I held her hand in the front office while a woman in a dark coat, one I recognized from the school gate, spoke quietly on the phone near the door. Kiki knew something was wrong. She didn't ask what. She just leaned against my arm and held her backpack straps with both hands, and that stillness in her, that learned, careful stillness, broke something in me quietly. She was 7. She shouldn't know how to be still like that. Jae-sung came to the apartment that evening with his jaw set in a way I hadn't seen before. He stood in the center of my living room and didn't sit down. "Rashid has people," he said. "Even from inside, he's been directing this. The note, the calls, now this." He paused. "He wants you to feel like there's no wall high enough." "Is there?" I asked. He looked at me steadily. "I will end it." The words were quiet, final. The way a door sounds when it closes completely. What does that mean? I asked. He didn't answer immediately. He looked toward the hallway where Kiki had gone to bed, and something passed across his face. That same expression from the kitchen table, the one that belonged to a different grief entirely. It means, he said, that no one will use your daughter's name as a weapon again. I didn't ask anything else. 2 days later, the messages stopped. No unknown numbers. No cars I didn't recognize. No sounds outside the door at night that made me lie awake cataloging exits. Just silence. The clean, deliberate kind that told me the quiet hadn't happened on its own. On the 4th day, a number I didn't recognize called. I almost ignored it. It was Rashid's lawyer. His voice was efficient, unbothered. Rashid was taking a plea deal. 6 years. A permanent no-contact order covering both myself and Kiki. I sat down on the kitchen floor. Not because my legs gave out, though they nearly did, but because I needed to be low and grounded and certain that what I was hearing was real. 6 years. No contact. Forever. I pressed my back against the cabinet and closed my eyes. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, I let myself exhale all the way. The first sign that things were changing was Kiki sleeping through the night. Not once, consistently. 7 nights in a row, then 14, then so many that I stopped counting and started simply waking up in the morning feeling something unfamiliar and cautious, the way you feel when a bruise you've been guarding stops hurting and you can't quite trust it yet. I stood in her doorway some mornings just to watch her sleep. Her mouth slightly open, her drawings stacked on the desk beside her bed, her purple backpack hanging on the hook where it was supposed to hang, in a home that had started to feel, slowly and stubbornly, like one. I enrolled in nursing classes 6 weeks after the plea deal. The campus was 40 minutes by bus, Tuesday and Thursday evenings, and I sat in the back row the first night with my notebook open and my pen ready and the specific, quiet terror of someone who has wanted something for so long that wanting it out loud feels dangerous. By the 3rd week, I was sitting in the middle. By the 6th, I had a study group and a professor who wrote sharp instincts in the margin of my first paper. I didn't tell Jae-sung about the comment. He found out anyway. He had a way of knowing things. He had become, without either of us formally deciding it, part of the rhythm of our weeks. Sunday lunches. School events when he could manage them. Quiet evenings on the couch while Kiki fell asleep between us watching something she'd already seen 4 times. He and Kiki had developed their own language, a running conversation about her drawings that had evolved into her assigning him characters. He was, as of last month, the knight with the serious face who lived next to the Queen Lion's castle. He accepted this without complaint. I watched him with her sometimes when he didn't know I was watching. The way he listened when she talked. The way he never rushed her, never checked his phone, never gave her the distracted half-attention she could always detect. He was fully present in a way that looked almost like it cost him something, like presence was a thing he had once taken for granted and would never do again. It was a Tuesday evening when he said it. Kiki was already in bed. We were on the balcony, the city moving quietly below us, the kind of comfortable silence that takes months to build with another person. I want to protect you permanently, he said. Not a proposal. Not a declaration. Just a fact he was placing carefully on the table between us, giving me space to look at it from all sides. That sounds dangerous, I said. It is. He didn't dress it up. My life is not clean, Damilola. I want you to know that clearly. I looked at the traffic lights below. Red, green. The ordinary pulse of a city that had kept moving through everything that had happened to us. I've lived with danger, I said. The difference is, you're the first person who ever made me feel like safety was something I was allowed to choose. He turned to look at me, and when he kissed me it was slow and certain, the kind that doesn't ask a question because it already knows it isn't rushing anywhere. The city kept moving below us. Inside, Kiki slept soundly, and the apartment, for the first time in years, did not smell like fear. It smelled like something I was only just remembering the name of. Home. He told her to dress warmly. That was all he said, dress warmly and bring Kiki, and something in his tone made her not ask questions. Kiki, who had no such restraint, asked 11 questions on the way to the car, and received the same patient non-answer each time until she gave up and pressed her forehead against the window to watch the city slide past. It was her birthday. Damilola had assumed lunch somewhere quiet. Maybe the bookshop Kiki had been asking about. Something small and warm and enough. She had stopped assuming small things with Jae-sung. He drove them to a street she didn't recognize. Wide, tree-lined, the kind of residential quiet that feels deliberate, like the neighborhood itself had decided to take a breath. He pulled up in front of a townhouse set back from the pavement, 2 stories, warm light glowing behind every window as though someone had turned each one on individually just before they arrived. Damilola looked at it through the windscreen. Come and see it first, he said. He opened her door. She stepped out slowly, the way you do when you're not sure the ground will hold. Kiki was already on the pavement, turning in a slow circle, craning her neck up at the house with an expression of pure, uncomplicated wonder. Is this ours? Kiki asked. Go inside, Jae-sung said. The front door opened into a hallway that smelled like fresh paint and cedarwood. Clean floors, high ceilings, windows that let the evening light in at an angle that made everything feel considered. Kiki ran ahead. She found her room first, because of course it had been made easy to find. The door slightly open, the light already on. She pushed it wide and went very still in the doorway. Purple and yellow. Her exact colors, in the exact combination she had drawn in approximately 47 pictures over the past year. A desk by the window, shelves already waiting, a corkboard on the wall, empty, ready. Mommy, she said softly. Just that. Damilola pressed her hand to her mouth. Jae-sung touched her elbow gently and guided her down the hall to the second door. A desk. Bookshelves lined with nursing textbooks organized by subject. A small lamp angled perfectly for reading. And on the desk's corner, placed with the same quiet deliberateness as everything else he did, a brand new stethoscope, still in its case. Damilola stood in the center of the room and couldn't speak. For your studies, he said. Unnecessary. She knew. She just needed a moment before she could look at him. When she did, her eyes were full. You're rebuilding my life, she said. He was quiet for a moment. That particular stillness of his that she had learned, by now, meant he was choosing his words with both hands. You rebuilt mine first, he said. They moved in on a Saturday. Kiki directed the placement of every piece of furniture in her room with the authority of a small general and the aesthetic opinions of someone who had been thinking about this her entire life. Jae-sung carried boxes without complaint. Damilola hung Kiki's drawings on the corkboard one by one until the whole wall was covered in lions and knights and queen lions and a serious-faced man standing beside a castle. That evening they ate takeaway on the living room floor because the table wasn't assembled yet, and Kiki fell asleep between them with a piece of spring roll still in her hand. Damilola looked around the room, at the warm walls, at the light, at the life arranged carefully around her like something that had been built on purpose. Rashid did not cross her mind. Not once. He had been, without her fully noticing it happening, reclassified from threat to memory, from memory to distance, from distance to something so faint it barely had a shape anymore. She picked up her keys from the counter, held them in her palm, and felt, completely and without qualification, free. Kiki started calling him Uncle Tae on a Wednesday, for no reason she could explain. He had arrived for dinner, and she had run to the door and said, Uncle Tae, come and see what I drew, and pulled him by the hand toward the kitchen table before he'd even taken off his coat. He had looked at Damilola briefly over Kiki's head with an expression she couldn't fully read, something between surprised and undone, and then he had followed her daughter to the table and sat down and looked at the drawing with his full attention. He didn't mention it afterward. Neither did Damilola. But the name stayed. It fit him the way some names do. Not because they're assigned, but because they're recognized, like the word had simply been waiting for the right person to arrive. He came to Kiki's school assembly in November. He sat in the third row in a coat that cost more than most of the parents' monthly rent and looked entirely unbothered by this fact. And when Kiki walked onto the stage and found his face in the crowd, she waved with her whole arm. He raised one hand. Small, calm, deliberate. Kiki beamed like she'd been given something. On the walk home she held one of his hands and one of Damilola's, swinging between them on the pavement and narrating every detail of the performance, including parts she had not personally been involved in. He listened to all of it. He asked follow-up questions. Damilola watched them from a step behind and felt something rearrange itself quietly inside her chest. There had been a time when a man's hand raised in her direction made her body react before her mind could catch up. A flinch she had learned to disguise as adjusting her hair, or turning away, or suddenly needing something from the other side of the room. The body remembers what the mind is still trying to process. That was something her counselor had told her, and it was true in a way that no amount of telling yourself it's over could simply override. Jae-sung had never once made her flinch. Not because he was careful in an obvious walking on eggshells way, but because his control was genuine, the kind that came from someone who understood, deeply and personally, what it meant to lose something precious through violence. His stillness wasn't suppression. It was grief that had been converted, slowly, into intention. Rashid's hands had always been looking for something to break. Jae-sung's were always, quietly, trying to hold things together. She was washing dishes one evening when Kiki appeared at her elbow. "Mommy, is Uncle Tae going to stay?" Damilola turned off the tap, dried her hands, crouched down so they were level, the way you do when a question deserves your full face. "Why are you asking?" Kiki shrugged with one shoulder, her tell, the one that meant she cared more than she wanted to show. "Some people leave," she said simply. The sentence landed with the full weight of everything a 7-year-old should not yet know about the world. "Come here," Damilola said. She held her for a moment. Then, over Kiki's shoulder, she saw Jae-sung standing in the kitchen doorway. He had heard. She could see it in the stillness of him. He came and crouched beside them both. "I'm not going anywhere, Kiki," he said, quietly, directly. The way he said everything that mattered, no decoration, no performance. Just the words, placed carefully, meant to hold. Kiki studied his face with those serious eyes of hers. Then she nodded once, satisfied, and went back to her drawings. Damilola stood slowly. Jae-sung rose beside her. Their eyes met briefly over the ordinary, luminous fact of the life arranged around them. The dinner cooling on the counter, the drawings on the wall, the small, serious girl already absorbed in her next creation. No words necessary. Some things, by now, they simply knew. She asked him about the rings on a quiet Sunday. They were on the balcony after lunch, Kiki inside finishing a drawing she had declared too important to abandon for fresh air. The city moved below them at its usual unhurried weekend pace. Jae-sung had his coffee. Damilola had been turning the question over in her mind for months. Since the grocery store, since the parking lot, since every moment in between when she had almost asked and then decided she wasn't ready for the answer. Today she was ready. "The rings," she said. "In the store. Why did you take them off first?" He looked at his hands. He still wore them, 3 on his right hand. She had noticed, over months of watching him, that he never removed them casually, never fidgeted with them. They sat on his fingers with the permanence of something decided. "My father taught me," he said. "A long time ago," he said. "A man who fights with his rings on is a man who wants to do more damage than necessary." A pause. "Taking them off means you've made a choice, that you'll use only what's needed. No more." "A rule," Damilola said. "A discipline," he corrected gently. He was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, she understood he was going somewhere he didn't often go. "In the store," he said. "I almost kept walking." She looked at him. "I saw him grab you. I registered what it was." His jaw tightened slightly. "And for about 3 seconds, I told myself it wasn't my situation. That I had learned, after everything, to stop carrying things that weren't mine to carry." "What changed?" she asked. "Kiki." He said it simply. No elaboration needed, and yet he continued because this part she understood he had needed to say for a long time. "When she dropped to her knees, when I saw her hands like that," he stopped, set his coffee down. "My daughter's name was Suyin. She was 5. She used to pray before bed with her hands exactly like that." The balcony was very still. "I couldn't save Suyin," he said. I was 20 minutes away, and I have spent 3 years understanding that 20 minutes is not a distance you negotiate with. It's just gone. A breath. But I was not 20 minutes away from Kiki. I was 15 feet. And I was standing there choosing to walk away. He looked at his hands again. So I took off my rings. Damilola thought about the man she had first seen at the end of that aisle. The stillness that had seemed, at the time, almost frightening in its contrast to the chaos. She understood it differently now. It wasn't indifference. It was a man in the middle of a private reckoning, making a decision in real time that would cost him something. His anonymity, his careful distance, the protective numbness he had been building for 3 years around the place where his family used to be. He had taken off his rings and walked forward. "You could have kept walking," she said. "You had every reason to." "Yes," he said. "But you didn't."
No.
She reached over and took his hand, the one with the rings, and held it in both of hers. She looked at them. Heavy, plain silver. Small monuments to a discipline built from loss. "I know who you are," she said quietly. "I know your life isn't clean. I know what you're capable of, and I know what it costs you." He met her eyes. "And I'm choosing you," she said, fully, knowing all of it. The city moved below them. His hand turned in hers and held on. And somewhere in the kitchen behind them, Kiki hummed her school song. Unaware, unhurried, completely safe, while the man who had chosen not to walk away sat in the Sunday light and, for the first time in 3 years, allowed himself to simply stay. A year later, Kiki won an art prize at school. It was not a large prize, a certificate, a ribbon, and a gift voucher for the craft shop on the high street, but she accepted it on the small assembly stage with the gravity of someone receiving something historic, and when she found their faces in the crowd, she pointed directly at Jae-sung, as though he were personally responsible, which in some ways Damilola supposed he was. He had been the one to buy her the good-colored pencils, the ones she'd been asking about for months. He accepted the credit with his usual stillness. Afterward, walking home, Kiki held the certificate flat with both hands so it wouldn't crease, and narrated to no one in particular exactly what she planned to draw next. A series, she explained, about a girl who becomes a doctor and also a queen. "Both?" Jae-sung asked. "Obviously both," Kiki said. Damilola was 8 months into her nursing program. Her placement supervisor had written in her last assessment that she had the kind of instinctive calm under pressure that couldn't be taught, only lived. Damilola had read it twice on the bus home and then folded it carefully and put it in the drawer where she kept the things that mattered. She understood by now where that calm had come from. You learned stillness when stillness was the only thing that kept you upright. You learned to read a room, read a face, read the temperature of a situation before it changed, when your survival had once depended on exactly that. The hard years had not only taken from her. They had, without asking permission, made her someone. She was still discovering who that someone was. She found her a little more each week. Rashid did not cross her mind the way he used to. There had been a period, longer than she liked to admit, when he had lived rent-free in the background of every ordinary moment. A hand raised too quickly by a stranger. A raised voice in the next apartment. The particular quality of silence that precedes something bad. He had colonized the small spaces of her nervous system and made them his. He was gone from them now. Not dramatically. Not all at once. More the way a smell fades from a room when you open the windows long enough. You stop noticing its absence because the absence has simply become the air. 6 years. No contact. Forever. She never said his name anymore. Neither did Kiki. She thought, sometimes, about the version of her life that had almost been. A grocery store on a Tuesday evening. Milk burst open on the floor. The world tilting. Her daughter's hands pressed together on dirty tiles. Begging. How close it had all come to ending there. Not with death necessarily, but with the smaller, slower ending. The one where fear wins permanently and you spend the rest of your life making yourself small enough to survive inside it. And then a man at the end of an aisle had looked at his hands and made a choice. Her life had split cleanly into before and after that moment. Not because he had rescued her exactly, but because he had refused to walk away. There was a difference she had come to understand. Being rescued implied helplessness. What Jae-sung had done was something else. He had simply refused to let her be alone in it. That refusal had changed everything. On the evening of the anniversary, though neither of them marked it formally, they sat on the balcony after Kiki was in bed, the city doing its usual quiet work below them. No cachen. No ceremony. Just the ordinary, accumulated weight of a life that had been chosen, piece by piece, and was still being chosen. Damilola rested her head against his shoulder. He put his arm around her without looking up from the middle distance, the way you do with things that have become natural. Fear didn't leave all at once. It was replaced. Slowly, quietly, in grocery runs and Sunday lunches and school assemblies and late evenings on a balcony, by a man who chose to stand still when everyone else walked away. And what remained in the space fear had once occupied was this. Just this. Warm light, a sleeping child, a city breathing below them, and a life that finally, undeniably, belonged to her. A year later, Kiki won an art prize at school. It was not a large prize, a certificate, a ribbon, and a gift voucher for the craft shop on the high street, but she accepted it on the small assembly stage with the gravity of someone receiving something historic, and when she found their faces in the crowd, she pointed directly at Jae-sung, as though he were personally responsible, which in some ways Damilola supposed he was. He had been the one to buy her the good-colored pencils, the ones she'd been asking about for months. He accepted the credit with his usual stillness. Afterward, walking home, Kiki held the certificate flat with both hands so it wouldn't crease, and narrated to no one in particular exactly what she planned to draw next. A series, she explained, about a girl who becomes a doctor and also a queen. Both? Jae-sung asked. Obviously both, Kiki said. Damilola was 8 months into her nursing program. Her placement supervisor had written in her last assessment that she had the kind of instinctive calm under pressure that couldn't be taught, only lived. Damilola had read it twice on the bus home and then folded it carefully and put it in the drawer where she kept the things that mattered. She understood by now where that calm had come from. You learned stillness when stillness was the only thing that kept you upright. You learned to read a room, read a face, read the temperature of a situation before it changed, when your survival had once depended on exactly that. The hard years had not only taken from her. They had, without asking permission, made her someone. She was still discovering who that someone was. She found her a little more each week. Rashid did not cross her mind the way he used to. There had been a period, longer than she liked to admit, when he had lived rent-free in the background of every ordinary moment. A hand raised too quickly by a stranger. A raised voice in the next apartment. The particular quality of silence that precedes something bad. He had colonized the small spaces of her nervous system and made them his. He was gone from them now. Not dramatically. Not all at once. More the way a smell fades from a room when you open the windows long enough. You stop noticing its absence because the absence has simply become the air. 6 years. No contact. Forever. She never said his name anymore. Neither did Kiki. She thought, sometimes, about the version of her life that had almost been. A grocery store on a Tuesday evening. Milk burst open on the floor. The world tilting. Her daughter's hands pressed together on dirty tiles. Begging. How close it had all come to ending there. Not with death necessarily, but with the smaller, slower ending. The one where fear wins permanently and you spend the rest of your life making yourself small enough to survive inside it. And then a man at the end of an aisle had looked at his hands and made a choice. Her life had split cleanly into before and after that moment. Not because he had rescued her exactly, but because he had refused to walk away. There was a difference she had come to understand. Being rescued implied helplessness. What Jae-sung had done was something else. He had simply refused to let her be alone in it. That refusal had changed everything. On the evening of the anniversary, though neither of them marked it formally, they sat on the balcony after Kiki was in bed, the city doing its usual quiet work below them. No cachen. No ceremony. Just the ordinary, accumulated weight of a life that had been chosen, piece by piece, and was still being chosen. Damilola rested her head against his shoulder. He put his arm around her without looking up from the middle distance, the way you do with things that have become natural. Fear didn't leave all at once. It was replaced. Slowly, quietly, in grocery runs and Sunday lunches and school assemblies and late evenings on a balcony, by a man who chose to stand still when everyone else walked away. And what remained in the space fear had once occupied was this. Just this. Warm light, a sleeping child, a city breathing below them, and a life that finally, undeniably, belonged to her. If you enjoyed the story this far, don't let it end here. Hit that subscribe button so you never miss the next chapter and enjoy more story from us. And if this story gave you chills, drop a like and share it with someone who loves powerful romance with a dangerous edge. Your support keeps these stories coming. Thank you.